Well, hi there. Welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset, wherever you happen to be. I am your host, Mike Hingson. Today we get to chat with Daniel Spelman. Daniel lives in Liverpool. I haven't heard that he tried out with the Beatles yet, but well, he can talk about that if he wants.
A little
But
bit before my time,
a
but
little bit before your time. Well, there you go. But still, I know Daniel has lots of stories and lots of things to talk about. Um, gosh, starting out almost from birth, but we'll get to all of that. But Daniel, first of all, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Really glad you're here and looking forward to the next hour.
Michael, thank you for having me. As I just said to you before we start recording, it's hearing your story and what you've been through and the challenges you've faced to be asked to be a guest on your podcast is an absolute honor, mate.
Well, I'm glad really to have you here, and I know you have a lot of a story to tell. So why don't we start by why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of the early Daniel growing up and all that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so growing up, we spoke briefly before when we were sort of arranging the podcast. Something I've never really touched on in my sort of career in radio broadcasting is people sort of forget, they hear my voice, but they may not know what I may look like or what I go through. But I was born with the medical condition cerebral palsy. I never say disability. It's not in my mindset to say that. I feel like it's a negative. I don't know why. I just always have felt that way. But yeah, growing up was tough. You know, having a condition not many people sort of understood, and I feel like to this day, cerebral palsy is one of them conditions that people don't fully understand because people can have it in different spectrums. You know, one of my closest friends in radio has it a little bit more severe than me, but is still one of the best broadcasters I've ever watched grow and develop, and one of the best human beings I know as well. And you know, I had a big surgery just going into my teens, but before getting into that, like, I think just the social aspect, you know, cerebral palsy can be anything from just moderate things. So like I had difficulty tying shoelaces at a young age, tying buttons, anything fiddly just wasn't for me. Socially, I wasn't that great. I was quite anxious. I was quite shy, which is mad to think now. But yeah, I did really struggle in sort of childhood. I had to wear splints, something I've never really spoke on before, which wasn't a nice thing. You know, I was sort of bullied in primary, what we call primary school in the UK, and it sort of thickened me up. I've always had a thick skin. It's funny now, them same people who picked on me back then now sliding into me DMs because of the career I've somehow managed to sort of carve out for myself and the things I've achieved. But going into 2008, I had a major surgery. I still remember the doctor's name, Dr. Sampath. It was in one of probably the best hospitals in the UK for children called Alder Hey here in Liverpool as well. And I had to, going into that, I had to do this thing called gait analysis. So basically, I don't know if you're a big sci-fi fan, Michael.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so you know when you might sort of watch something and you've got like probes on them to record or, you know, do to make the movie sort of thing, and you'll see them in like weird suits, or you'll, you know, hear it and it's just one of them things. So I basically had to do that. It looked like I was going for like an episode of Star Trek or something. So I had all these probes stuck on me. I had to walk up and down. I had to do all these different movements just to see what was going on. And then that led to the surgery in 2008 where my hamstring was re-lengthened, my calf muscle was redone, my ankle was shattered and put back together with metal plates and rods and all that stuff. It was really in-depth surgery. I was in surgery, I think, for 6 to 8 hours. A family member told me. I got told that I wouldn't be able, I'd have to learn to walk again, obviously, but I wouldn't be able to walk for, you're looking at like 2 years. So, you know, I was in like year 8 at this point. So I was, which is like middle school, I guess, in high school terms in America. Not too sure. But yeah, so it was like second year of high school, basically. So I missed the entirety of that. sort of just had to somehow just sitting in one room for 6, 8 months. Just the idea of doing that drove me insane.
Yeah.
I managed to rehab in 8 months. So from 2 years being told not to walk, I was walking again in 8 months, which was, I still say to this day, is probably my biggest achievement. Don't know how I did it. I was 13, 14. Didn't learn to have the mindset of knowing how to walk again. I don't even know how I would do it if I had to have that surgery over again. But yeah, that was sort of early childhood going into teens.
Now, was the surgery essentially the result of the cerebral palsy? Is that really kind of the underlying thing that caused the need to do it, and why your ankle needed to be lengthened and so on?
Yeah, so it weren't that it had to be, it was becoming uncomfortable. So basically what cerebral palsy is, for those who don't know, is it's basically the spasticity around your joints constantly tighten. So this surgery weren't supposed to be a long-term fix for me. I'm not saying it is, but I went on from that surgery in 2008. I always say that is the turning point in my life, really. There was two turning points. One we'll get onto in a little bit in 2011. The other one was 2008. Going through that, it was a result of the CP, but it was to it was just to give me a better quality of life. It went to say it was going to be life altering, which it turned out it was. Both my legs were supposed to be getting done, but they went I'm more predominant on my left side than just my left leg. So my right side is quite strong. As I said, I had it mild through. I had a bleed on the brain when I was born. That's where my CP came from. I call it CP for short because it's a lot easier to say.
And people know that.
Yeah. So yeah, I sort of the surgery was a result of that. So like just it was more the rehab. So you'd see different elements. I went through hydrotherapy, so it was a lot of getting into hot water and movements, and that was the tedious side of it. I always remember I hated swimming anyway. So when I was like, we're going to do hydrotherapy, and I thought, oh, that sounds lovely. That just sounds like I'm going to be on a beach. No, it was a lot of hard work, and a really hot swimming pool. But came through it. It was definitely a life-changing experience in mentality as well as physical for me.
How did your parents cope with all of this?
So my parents are separated when I was growing up, so I only lived with my mum. My mum, and I've never said this to her because I'm quite, I'm not a softie, but she was definitely a rock. So was my brother and my sister. It must have been hard on them to see me go through that, but and obviously they must have got some stick in school. I don't know. I don't know what they experienced. But my mum always has been this sort of super caring person. My dad also visited me. It's not like I don't know who he is. But yeah, it definitely did take its toll. I think more on my mum than anyone else, because obviously I was bedridden in the living room for those 8 months. And I did get school visits from, my classmates, and it was my mum who took me into school because she just saw me being fed up at home. So I ended up going into school in a wheelchair towards the end of that second year in high school. I got back for the start of the third, and then they wanted to take the metal rods out, and I was like, you can wait a little bit because I'm not sitting in any more beds or hospital beds. I've only just started walking again. No. We crack jokes. I think with my family, it's a lot of humour. So my brother, because he knew I had the metal plate on my foot, or he said he'll get a big magnet to it and see what happens. But yeah, it was just a little bit of humour. I think you just sort of deal with them things in the moments. I'm sure you've had them moments as well with your condition where people wouldn't sort of understand fully. You sort of just get these hurdles and you've sort of got to jump over them, or it's sort of sink or swim is probably the best way to put it.
Right. Well, and then that's the choice that you get to make.
Yeah.
And you talked about disability and that you don't like to say that what you had was a disability. I appreciate that. I'm actually in the process of writing an article that probably I'll finish this weekend. And the title of it is Disability, a New Definition. And what I'm basically saying is, in the article, disability does not mean a lack of ability. And that the reality is that everyone has some sort of disability, and I could make that case very strongly. And the idea is that basically disability is a characteristic we all have, and it manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah. I always remember I done my work experience. We do this thing in the UK. I don't know if you do it in America or where you are. Like basically you'd go into, towards the end of high school, you'd go into a place of work for 2 weeks and you would experience what it's like just doing an everyday job. So I don't know what you call it, a canteenman, like a canteen lady, but that's what I did. Basically, I went a canteen lady. I was just serving food. But in that process, I met, it was in my mum's school. My mum was a TA and she supported kids with autism, people who couldn't physically speak. They had to use sign language or PECs, like these little sign sort of books things. And it was very interesting, to be fair. And this was a lad in a different class to me, but I just sort of took a liking. We sort of just bonded. And he had a condition, I can't remember what it was called, but basically his life expectancy wasn't that high. Like you're looking at mid-30s tops. But he understood and probably lived more like life-wise. Like he just enjoyed life, the little things, so much. And I just, to this point, I was like, no matter, some people live more in 30 than some people do in 80.
Yeah.
And that's something that just sort of stuck with me. And then little sort of mottos, like I read somewhere in a book, you can, just decide what you want to be and go be it. Can't remember where I saw that, but that's sort of a motto that stuck in my head. I didn't know what I wanted to do because obviously I had all these surgeries, I had all these obstacles to overcome. I didn't really do well in a classroom at all in that sort of environment. It just wasn't for me. I was always fidgeting. I sort of just was like, I want to be doing something. I don't want to just be sat here doing, math, which would come in handy, to be fair. But, you think like that when you're young, and then when you leave, you go, I should have took advantage of being in that room and learning off these people who've got degrees and stuff. So, yeah, I was sort of in that sort of back end of high school, just my mind wasn't in it. I was just like wanting to be elsewhere. I actually wanted to be a cook. My granddad was a massive influence on me, still is to this day. Even through the battles he's having currently with his health, still the one looking after all of us. So, yeah, I wanted to sort of be a chef like him, but then realised I just didn't have the patience when it comes to cooking at all, or they'll eat the food while they're making it. I'm going to be totally honest. So I remember I'd always been intrigued by music. My brother DJ'd, I played guitar. My dad was a massive Bowie's fan. So, music, I was a massive Beatles fan growing up. Not like it's popular now for young people to like old music. It wasn't then. I was playing Beatles riffs on an electric guitar at the age of 14, 15. Don't get a chance to play my guitar as much as I would now, like to now. But yeah, absolutely loved Beatles, loved different genres of music. My mum was a big rock fan. She also liked a lot of pop. So it was always different. Something was being played. There was always some musical element in the house, or the radio was on. And I just got intrigued by radio. Like, how does this work? I always had that sort of inkling. So in 2011, I was volunteering anyway, because I just felt like, because I left school with not much in education wise, like qualifications, anything like that. I was like, how can I make up for that? Right, okay, I can outwork everyone in the room. That's always been just my mentality. It doesn't matter if I've got a condition, I'll outwork any person in any room. Like, you can be I'm the first one in, the last to leave. And that's the mentality I take into everything I do. So I started just volunteering in charity shops, furniture shops, like you name it. I locally, I was involved in it. If it was putting on events for charities, if it was just collecting money for charities, I did that. And then I remember going into college to enroll. on a media course, and I came across a community college radio station, community radio station based within the college I was going to, and I was speaking to a lad called Dave North, who's now a presenter on BBC Merseyside, now who's phenomenal. Still, I would later become a mentor, and I would later go on to, work alongside him at the radio station, and I would, go on to take one of the shows he sort of made iconic at that station. So yeah, signed up at 15, and just got this radio bug. I was a massive nerd. I just became a sponge listening to all these amazing people who have gone on to have commercial success in the radio industry in the UK. I could name so many people off the top of my head. Rob Tobin, who's Kiss FM's one of the biggest stations in the UK. He's now producing the breakfast show there, which is like amazing. There's so many people, and it's not even the people who made it in the industry. It's other people who are just really good mentors, as in how to be a good person. So yeah, I learned a lot at that station, KCC Live. So I was there from 2011. That's when I started there.
And how long were you there?
All the way up till 2022. So
wow, it's 10 years.
Yeah, 10 plus years.
10
so
plus years.
Yeah. So
well,
come on.
So radio, you definitely got the radio bug, and you decided to kind of make that a career to work at.
I realized I was really good at chatting nonsense very quickly. And I was naturally just funny without thinking I'm funny. But I weren't great off the bat. Like, I had amazing teachers. Hal Evans, he was a massive mentor in sort of my management stage. He saw something in me when I started presenting the drive show. But Chrissy Willis, now she's another like high up in BBC, sort of management and journalism and stuff. And she sort of, I call her me radio mum. She'd hate me hearing me say that to her, but like, she was a really good mentor. You could just have a cup of tea with her and talk about anything that's going on, sort of personal, because that's what the community radio station is. I don't know if it's the layout in America, but over here you have several different types of radio stations. So that was a community station. So you would have some paid staff, you would have a massive volunteer base within it. So it was like 50, 60 volunteers at any given time, really, in different roles. I sort of done a lot of shows. I did take a breather in 2015, and sort of, I was going into my 20s then. I just finished my sort of media sort of course, and I took a little bit of a breather from doing radio shows. Still sort of popped into the station, still kept my head in there. I was always doing management stuff behind the scenes as well. So I wasn't just presenting, I was learning programming, how you put shows together, idents, like the production of a show, what goes into, making an entire product, and all these other elements. So when I sort of left and got that breather and came back, I remember Chrissy turning around to me. I came back, and I was just covering a mid-morning show, 10 till 1. We call it mid-morning over here. And for a couple of weeks. And then the then Drive presenter, the show was called The Big Loud Drive. Never changed its name in the time period that show ran from the beginning of the station. So it broadcasted to the whole of Knowsley, which is one of the biggest boroughs of Liverpool. And it had its challenges financially because of, it was a community radio station. A lot of people's connotations with radio are very commercial, or the BBC, or it's not. Like, a lot of it's funding, it's a lot of it's community projects. So we were doing a lot of that, events as well. I learned there was just a broad spectrum. I could be here for 8 hours talking about it. But yeah, when I came back in 2015, after a little bit of a breather, so 2015, back end of 2015, going into 2016, Chrissy asked me to take on the then sort of drive show. Going into 2017, no, they said 2017. Then I was like, we're not there yet. But yeah, so that was a massive honor, because that's the show Dave North, who was like, when I speak about radio, or when I think about doing radio, his ideas when it came to radio games or features you'd hear on the radio, I've never met someone as brilliant as him. He would just come up with so many amazing games, stuff like that. And nothing in radio is original, but you've got to put your own spin on it, and you've got to be okay with doing that. Someone's thought of an idea, but how can you make it different? How can you make it your own? A good example of that is like carpool karaoke was a big thing in America. It was globally. Yeah. I done a thing called drive time karaoke where I would just phone someone and they'd have to finish a karaoke song.
But what time of day was the show on?
So it was 3 till 6 p.m. That was Monday to Thursday. But when I took over it was Monday to Friday. So I actually co-hosted it with a friend of mine, Ollie Downing, who was just someone who taught me techie side of stuff when I ended up taking over the radio station in a few more years. So I co-hosted it with him. So I started originally doing Monday, Tuesday. He done Wednesday, Thursday, and we had just sort of shared the Friday slot. And then when Chrissy left to go BBC, she made me the main sort of drive presenter, and I would then go on to do that show Monday to Thursday, sometimes Friday for the first year, for 5 years, 6 years, which was well, I didn't think of it at the time, but by the time I left in 2022, you know, someone said people have started uni and finished uni and I've gone into the careers while you've done this show. And I was like, I've never really thought about it like that. So it was a weird show to leave for me. It was somewhere I think I felt sort of comfortable in that time slot. I grew as a person. I sort of grew up as well from a sort of a teenager, young adult into, you know, doing adult things, you know, actually, you know, adult challenges and stuff and day-to-day life of I've done this, or, you know, it was just like the topics were so different from when I started that show. They were so silly to like, I'm not going to say they were serious, but, you know, they were more mature, sort of funny, you know, stuff. So as a presenter, I sort of found me groove in doing that show. And that's when I was put in the position, the station at the time went through a management change. As I said, Chrissy left, who was then the station manager, and one of my best friends, who I was close to at the station, Mark, took over. And it was just a lot of different elements, and for some reason it just didn't work out. And I sort of, without realizing it, took up the mantle of running the station. I think a lot of people just looked to me because I was a part of that management setup with so many other people, Matt Marshall's another person, with Chrissy, that I was always around those people in the early years. So I sort of started doing things what they would do, but like putting my own little twist on it. So, you know, my music taste and the way I see things is going to be different to what, you know, Janet down the street's going to think. But, you know, we could find some common ground. And obviously you've got to move with the times. So I was very aware of that. And then when I was offered the position of station manager, going into, I think it was like back end of 2019, 2020, I was running the station as a coordinator for the 2019. So I became the station manager in 2020 officially. And from that point, it was struggling financially. And I was talking to someone who was like involved with the station. He done a show, but he wanted to sort of come on board and help it sort of financially and support it. So I would just put him into contact with the board of directors who've sort of been the front of the station while I sort of learned how to sort of get to grips with managing a radio station. I was only at this point 23, 24, which is crazy to think, even a small radio station, but it's broadcasted to you know, thousands of people. That's a lot of pressure. Like that's not many people would do that. I think back now, and not many people would. It's a very sort of big step, and it was Hal, who I mentioned earlier, who he saw something in me when I was doing that sort of drive show, and he started becoming my mentor. He was working in commercial radio at the time, and I remember we sort of never really spoke with him. He was the founder of the station as well, with a guy called Chancellor George Sweeney. The station still exists to this day. Definitely go and support it, you know. I think it's definitely needed in the area it's from. I'm from that area, so like it's 100% needed. But yeah, when he came to me, and we sort of brokered a sort of a friendship and mentorship, because I went up to him one day and went, "Can you just like tell me how I can improve as a presenter? Be as harsh as you want, because I need that to." So something's not working and I can get to another level presenting, but I need someone to be harsh. Not harsh on purpose, but like, critique me the best you can, because I'm only going to develop through that. And he did. He didn't hold back, which I totally respect. And I saw the benefits for myself when I took in everything he said. And then later down the line, when I became station manager, he was a massive part of me being mentally sort of coping with that. So yeah, that was a big challenge. So literally, I was announced as station manager in December 2019, and obviously that was going into a thing called the global pandemic, which we all didn't see coming. So like the first thing I had to do was steer a radio station through that officially.
Yeah. And so you took on this responsibility. Were you still doing a show, or were you just manager full time and not doing a show anymore then?
No, I was still doing a show. I was doing a show
Wow.
5 days a week.
So you
Because
still did the drive show.
yeah. I felt like I wanted to be in the trenches with the volunteers.
Hmm.
And I wasn't being paid for that time I was doing the radio show. Like it was just something I had a passion for. It's something I wouldn't take payment. So I was doing in that time period we're talking about when I was becoming station manager, doing the show and still continuing to do the show. Obviously, when I was station manager, I was in a position of as technically paid staff, and basically I would just be making, because I just felt like, well, I'll do the show, but I would also be doing planning meetings with people,
Right.
dipping in and out. I'd be recording odd links and then jumping into the Zoom, or I'd be on the phone to someone going, right, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to plan. And sort of my methodology was just the biggest thing, because I came into that station as in a managerial role when it was sort of on its knees financially and creatively.
Why was that the case? Why was it having financial problems? It sounds like your show at least was very successful. Why were there financial problems?
Community radio. So like, as I said before, like, a lot of people's connotations with radio, especially in the UK, are very commercial or BBC. So community stations don't really make money like you would think, like through advertising or sponsorship. They could, but a lot of it's through funding projects and the kindness of people to, go, I see the value in this. If you think of it as like a local, sorry about that, a local boxing gym or something like that, it's the exact same thing. But what we were doing was just radio. It weren't like punching each other in the face.
Yeah.
But essentially, that it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same principle. It's just copy and paste. So it was just that management, like between myself and Chrissy, Mark, it just sort of broke down. I don't know the reasons. I still talk to Mark to this day, have a huge amount of respect for him as he does me. Not many people knows what it's like to sit in that seat as a station manager running a radio station. And I sort of just fell into it. I say this to people, I weren't probably the perfect choice. I was just the right person at the right time who picked up a couple of meetings who people pointed at or just looked at for leadership, and I don't know why. So that's when I sort of realized at 24 I was a leader and had to, there was people 10 years, 15 years older than me who had 10 years experience on me. But I remember two volunteers in particular, and I'm really good friends with them, and they one's just being on my show and I do a show for the other. So I don't mind name dropping them right now, but like his name's Johnny B, great DJ. And Matty Omi was a great volunteer. He should also just be not long become a dad. So congratulations, Matty, if you're watching this. I remember when I was announced station manager, my biggest worry was, how do I get the people I've known for years on board and behind this decision that the board of directors have made? And both of them called me back to back within an hour of each other just saying, you've got this, support you 100%. So like, soon as I knew I had them on board, I brought some old KCC Live OGs, we used to call them, back, and they got involved, and that sort of touched me emotionally. Just people that I looked up to when I was 15, 16, learning off them, came back just to do a show or just be involved with the station or just support like the new people at the station. So it was a big team effort. The first year when I was coordinator, we all just donated money to keep the station going. That is a true story. All the presenters, myself, I was working in another job. But yeah, like, that's what we did. We just chipped in money. And then, like, going into 2020, obviously, we had a new director come in. So Hal stepped away after 17 years. Which, even though he was still always on the phone to me, or I knew the call, if I needed him, I could call him. That was a big, like, I was then like, okay, this is sort of, I'm really steering the ship now. And yeah, we had a new station director, and that was something that was a big challenge. But first of all, had to get through COVID. So being 24, no one dealt with a global pandemic. So steered through that somehow, and we actually trebled content in that time. So we went from struggling, so we are still struggling financially, but we are, with the new director, he sort of had connections with funding streams, so he sort of took care of that side of things. And my job was just to worry about the programming. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that, got through COVID somehow. I was doing like the safety checks for COVID. So I was the guy who would still go in, even with my disability, I'll still go in, condition. I said the disability word. And I went in and I sort of checked in on the station, but I would also have an open door policy. So I can't continue that through COVID. I'd have meetings with everyone every day. I'd have a 4 p.m. check-in or 5 p.m. check-in time where we'll just have a Zoom. And we could just talk and sort of chat to everyone. If anyone had any inklings or they wanted to change something about the station, I was totally open to that, because you need to be. You need, you're only as good as your weakest part of the team, and no one was weak. We all helped each other, and we were all like, my thing's always been like, oh, I'm doing really well, I'm gonna pick my friend up and we're gonna climb this mountain together. Come on, oh, there's a bigger hill, let's go together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go long, you go together. And it's one of them, like, it works.
You built a team.
Yeah. And we managed to turn it around quite strong financially, to the point where I had paid staff around me as well. So I had an amazing marketing guy. I got to pick him, come in, and he changed the atmosphere to another level. So it went from being non-creative, sort of creatively stifled when I took over, to everyone laughing, taking the mick, but in a good way. And we were all like, everyone could just give freedom of expression, which was the whole point of the station. It was there for young people to sort of develop and learn about themselves, like I did. And it's all about, young people finding the voice as well. So you make that front and center, and you say to people, like, you make a mistake, I'm not going to tell you off. You only learn from your mistakes. I encourage mistakes. Like, people go, oh, I messed up, I stuttered on that. I was like, and that just means you don't sound like Siri or Alexa or all these other, devices. That just proves to the listener you're human. It's okay. So it was just little things like that, and people felt comfortable. And then we brought in Meg Shaw, who's a phenomenal singer, by the way, local artist where I am in Liverpool. She actually went to Paul McCartney's school, by the way, talking about the Beatles. So she came in on a Kickstarter scheme, and within months, this is just 18 months on from me taking over, we won Radio Station of the Year, which is the award just behind me for those. I've just realised it's on my shelf just right there. So I've got a copy of that one. There's one in the KCC Live headquarters still, but yeah, I got kindly given one as well. So that was quite nice to sort of have one to keep. So yeah, that was probably a highlight as well. sadly, my team at the time got COVID and I didn't, so I was the only one at the awards. But like we were up against major, BBC bite-sized programs and other radio entities, and we were just glad to be invited to go to the awards. So in 2021 to win that, I was just sat there. It took me a little second when they said the station. I was like, oh yeah, that's me, innit? So yeah, that was a really nice moment to pick up an award in such an incredible venue as Old Trafford Cricket Ground. So yeah, which is quite historic as well.
So as you were working at the radio station and all the work and activity that you had was kind of the remnants or all of the issues regarding CP much of an effect, or were you able to just not pay attention to that anymore because the surgery and everything that happened made you to the point where it wasn't really an issue for you?
I think because it's a lot of you sat down quite a lot. So it's sort of what you just said. Like it was very much sort of out my mind because I was so proactive and so busy. And I was also building bridges through this program with working with specialist schools who deal with young people with sort of challenging lives themselves, who have either different conditions. Maybe it is CP, maybe it's autism. I sort of built a bridge for them to come in and be a part of some projects and hear them get on the radio a little bit through a feature, and that was really cool because it then opened their eyes to, oh, we can do this. Dan used to come to the school, or Dan has something similar to what I have, but he's interviewed a lot of famous people, which I was lucky to do before I became station manager. So I'm happy I experienced doing that sort of stuff, like interviewing chart stars and film stars and working up and down the country, which I didn't mention, on, Comic-Con conventions and sort of, I got to get this high list of contacts who still keep in touch with me to this day. So I'm very fortunate with that. I've got to interview my favorite band, who are American Against the Current, became friends with them, to the point where, they would invite me to shows. Even if I weren't going to interview them, we would just hang, which was really cool. I would end up interviewing them because I'm all about content, as you already know, Michael. Never waste a moment.
Right.
But yeah, it was just all systems go. And there was also someone else at the station with a similar condition to me, with the same condition, but a little bit more severe to what I had. And just seeing him, he was like a right-hand man in the early years who just developed. His name's Brad. He's an absolutely phenomenal person. His radio knowledge, second to none, and he's very open about it. Me and him used to have open conversations about CP. So it's not like I totally forgot about it. It was something that, I think it motivated me more to be like,
yeah,
I can do this. Just because, I walk with a little bit of a limp don't count me out. I'll outwork anyone in the room. And I prove that. I was doing about 5-6 meetings in a day. I was doing a drive show. I was still doing the odd interview. So I'd still edit and do that. And then I was obviously creating shows with other presenters. I was doing the community events. I was, a radio practitioner. Sorry, that's my cat, Hendrix, making an appearance there. I was also the company we merged with at this point. I ran a radio course for them. So, I didn't run it. I was the practitioner of it. So I would teach some young people into a sort of level 1 radio course, all while I was running this radio station, which I look back now and I don't know how. I know you've just asked me how I did it. I don't know. And that's the total honest to God truth. I don't know how I did it. It was a lot of fun. And I wouldn't change anything really, apart from sort of the end.
Well, you basically made a decision to move forward with your life, and if you will, be unstoppable, but you made the decision to move forward. You knew how to do it, and you did. And as you said, it was mostly out of mind. As you pointed out, a lot of it was sitting down. It's not like you were out on a construction job or anything like that, working at the radio station. I don't know how many rooms there were in in the facility, but
It
certainly
was a
not a
few.
lot. But there were a few, but still, you were mostly not in a situation where an incredible amount of mobility was required, and you certainly had the mobility to do what you needed to do.
Yeah. Not only that though, it's sort of, even celebrities I've interviewed asked me a little bit about like how come you're limping? You're okay? Thinking of like fell over or something, and I would talk to them about it, and they were just amazed by what I was doing, and when like I'll tag friends along with me. So like if I was doing an event and it was for the station, I had best mates who had nothing really to do with the station, but would help me gain content. It's just, as I said before, I'm one of them people. Like if I'm going to the next mountaintop, I'm gonna pick you up with me. You know, we're gonna go together, stronger together.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been a mentality for me. So like they were amazing. Kevin M, my two best mates who sort of helped definitely through sort of when things got a little bit more darker in the following months. But yeah, Kev would actually come on board with the station and do a geek show. We were massive nerds, and I was sort of struggling when I was station manager, and just sort of more so after COVID, to be honest. It became a lot of people. It became a little bit more difficult to sort of manage when not everyone wants to be in the office, but it was a very split where it was just that was probably the biggest challenge where people were a bit hesitant with COVID, which was understandable, and we kept it. If people want to work remote, they can. People want to come in, they could. But it was that was probably the biggest sort of challenge, managing that, because obviously people are in like multiple places, and you've got to be in multiple places. But yeah, that was a massive challenge. I did then step away from doing the show in 2022. Just had to, in my last couple of months at the station, just had to. I just felt it was the right time. I felt like it was the right time a year prior, but the station director asked me to stay on. But then I sort of said like I need to sort of step away from this, just so I can focus on the backside of the sort of the station. I want to sort of indulge myself. The more I was in the role, the more I just wanted to be in behind the scenes, and I didn't really want to be the guy in front of the mic anymore. I felt my time had passed, and it's the same with sort of managerial things. I knew, I'm not going to be there forever. I'm there for a good time, not a long time. I said that in my first meeting. I'm there for a good time, not a long time. Because any managerial sort of role comes with a shelf life, and you've got to know that. You need to know when's the right time for you to step away. And towards the end for me was probably the difficult, because it was a passion project to this day. I loved the station. I loved everyone and I still love the people who are there now, and what the station stands for. It was just, for me, I showed undevoted loyalty to the station, and towards the end, the last year or so, that loyalty weren't shown back to me. And it did end quite sour, but you've got to move on. I ended up going into sales, which was definitely a different extreme. There was a very brief run in as a sales exec, but absolutely loved the business to business side of it and working with these companies, because I was sort of back at square one to a point of, I don't want to do radio. I want to take a little bit of a break from it, but I like the whole going to meetings, representing businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing I took a niche for as well, and doing SEO work as well. That's something that intrigued me, and I wanted to know how that worked. So I was doing a lot of business to business, with like sort of broadbands and some of the biggest names in the UK when it comes to that sort of stuff. So it's not like I was working for a small company. I was working for a major firm who had major clients. So it was definitely interesting for the brief stints I was doing that. But that's where I think it was the sort of that's my cat saying hello, everyone.
So you said your cat's name is Hendrix. Is that relation to Jimmy?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Sense is. I told you everything's musical with me. So yeah, he's a very talkative cat for sure.
So is mine.
Yeah, I think
the only thing I did is I closed the door so she can't come in, because otherwise we would be very disrupted.
Yeah, To him, he's probably wondering why I'm still like awake.
Yeah. Why are you still? It's time to go to sleep, there, Buster.
I'm basically getting told off.
Yeah.
So where was we? So yeah, I was doing sales, and that's where when we were talking about before, that's where because I was then constantly on the go. That's where my disability came in. So people
Hmm.
wondered why I stepped away from that role. It was I loved the title of a sales executive, but I stepped away for that just because of me condition. That's where I did. I think mentally with everything I went through towards the back end of my last position into the sales one, sort of took its toll. So I then stepped away from sort of that, and went through a few different avenues, done a lot of marketing, and doing some other projects. Got back into radio, so the radio bug came back, which was nice.
There you go.
It weren't gone for that long, but then setting up my own company currently with my brother is one of the projects I'm currently working on, which is marketing and social media management, something I've got a passion for, something I've won awards in doing as well, privately. So like that's something my brother said. It was my brother's idea, and I'm not going to take credit for it. Like he approached me and was like, you've got all these contacts, you've got this wealth of experience, I want something different. So at the moment, we're it's taking a little bit longer to set up than planned, but we're looking at launching later this month. So
That's cool.
we've got a few clients, and we've been sorting that side of it out. Obviously, we both have also day jobs, which I'm sort of going into a new career now as well, still doing radio and doing this. So I've got three things on the go, which I'm enjoying being busy again, but it's also a manageable schedule. When I was station manager, I think I look back at that now and I think I was definitely being so young benefited because I don't think I was managing it at a pace that was not obtainable. Basically, I couldn't keep going at that pace all the time. You have to learn to slow down. So I still manage certain things as well. I've been a part of charities in Liverpool and I've managed projects since, and that's something. And I'm now a mentor to a few people. So like what Hal was to me, I'm now that to a few other people
Which
privately.
is,
I'm not going to mention their name, but
yeah.
for their limited companies and their CITs, they come to me and I chat with them and I try and advise them in stuff and what I would do, or just if they want to throw a text at 2 in the morning and go, hey, I've had this mad idea, and I might not reply straight away, but I totally get it because I was there not that long ago where you do have those crazy project ideas where you go, I want to do this, and it's at 2 a.m. So you've got to write it down, or you've got to text someone to be like, or you're going to lose the trail of thought. But yeah, that's pretty much my journey in the last, I don't know, 18 months.
So what do you do in radio today?
So I am presenting a breakfast show on Can Do FM. So I was on air
Oh,
at 7 a.m. this morning.
okay.
So that's fun. I enjoy doing that. I do that one day a week. I have been sort of hosting multiple shows up and down the UK. I don't promote all of them because I'm covered on a lot of stations. I've actually,
That's good.
I think I can announce it to a point. I can't say what it is.
No,
But
that's okay.
just recorded for an audio book, which was really cool. That offered
When will it be published?
not too sure yet. Just it was the rough draft I've just recorded a few days ago. My family don't even know that, so that's an exclusive to you.
Is it a book you wrote?
No, it's someone else.
Okay.
I just got asked to voice it, and
There you go.
It's a well-known person, so I was very intrigued by that. So yeah, I've sort of enjoyed doing that, and I've continued sort of working with some of my sort of biggest contacts I sort of made up and down the UK. So I'm planning on doing a little bit more with the Comic Cons and the football clubs and stuff. Well, soccer as usual.
Yeah, football.
So yeah, I plan on doing that. And yeah, the other radio show I do is House Party Radio, which is funny enough, one of the lads from KCC Live, his station, he's opened his own station. So I give some time to that, and I'm also currently talking about redoing a drive show with one or two stations. It's just knowing where I'm going to land and what's the better fit. But yeah, doing a drive show is back in sort of niggling at me. I want to do do a daily show again. So I am talking to a couple of stations as well about doing that sort of full time with them and being not fully exclusive to them, because obviously I'm not going to leave the other stations just yet. But I'm sort of, getting to sort of, after being 10 years at one station, I feel like I'm in that zone right now where I'm enjoying
Right.
sort of dipping in and out of other stations, seeing how other stations operate completely different, and it's very interesting. Obviously, I still have big ties with people in Liverpool and talking and being someone that I do talks as well. I've been into schools, so I went into my old school about a year ago and done a talk to the kids there, which was interesting. And then obviously, I've got interviews and stuff that I've just recorded with some well-known cosplayers, and I've been asked to do a few more podcasts like this, not like this, but like culture, like media sort of based stuff, which I'm
having done radio and not to the level that you did, but I was in radio in college and so on, and a little bit of professional radio. Now doing a podcast, and I've been doing this since August of 2021. The advantage of a podcast, I suppose, if you could say it's a lazy attitude, but you don't have some of the limitations that you have in radio. So the podcast is whatever length you choose it to be. You can choose whether you want to have sponsors and commercials and all that, but podcasting is very much, from the general operation of it, a lot like radio, other than some of the things that are not as restrictive, like you have to end at exactly a particular time. So it's something else you might think about, and podcasting can be a very interesting and very visible medium to be able to be out there for the world to see and hear.
Yeah, it's something I've been approached about as well. I've been lucky that I've got these commercial contacts I've made over the last 10 years have reached out to me, but it's also, mentally I'm ready to jump back into that sort of cycle of, because that industry, people don't know.
A lot of preparation.
Yeah, it's media, music, that whole industry it's such fast pace. So if you can get out of it even if it's for a few years, do some different things,
Sure.
At the moment, and I think I'm still only, 28.
Yeah.
I'm not even yet, and I've got 10 years at one company. I've took it from being broke to award winning. I've went from not being able to walk to walking, and being an ambassador for Stick and Step, which I try to be. I'm not, I've done as much as I would like with that charity, which is a charity that raises awareness for CP. So I want to give them a mention here and actually be an ambassador for them. And they do phenomenal work. I'm going to try and plan a visit and go and see some of the little ones who they sort of support, and they deal with kids with CP who've got severe or mild, but like it could progressively get worse. It just depends on the spasticity. It's like everyone, like everyone's different, and it goes case by case. So not every case of CP is the same. It just varies on the person. Like if you told my doctor who gave me a surgery in 2008 that I'm still out and about doing stuff, okay, I have good days, bad days, but I'm up most days quite early to do physio or just get my joints sort of moving and do that. And I was doing that when I was running a radio station. I would get up, do exercises. Physio just gave me when I was recovering and in rehab for my surgery, just to sort of give myself an edge. And I try and walk as much as I can to places. I won't push my limits. I think you have to learn very quickly what your limits are. Right. I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's got fibromyalgia. I don't really understand that, but I can sort of get the similarities to what I've been through, right, where you can feel very fatigued out of nowhere. So it's just sort of learning your limits with anything in life. But yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell, really. I just keep plodding along, and I feel like that's sort of the best way.
There you go. Who have you interviewed that I might have heard of?
Ooh, so musically or film, or just shall I name off a few lists?
Whoever you think I might have heard of over here. No limitations.
So I've music-wise, Estelle, who done a track with Kanye West. I got the
Uh-huh.
pleasure of interviewing. I have interviewed. Oh, my man's going a little bit blank here. Ian McNeice, who's an actor who was in a film with Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Paul McGann, who was in Doctor Who. He actually played Doctor Who in the Doctor
Mm-hmm.
Who movie for the US. I've been very lucky enough to interview Matt Ryan, a great actor.
Mm.
He was also in a DC series. I have also interviewed David Tennant, who played Doctor Who, Matt Smith as well, which was really cool. The list's endless.
There you
When it
go.
comes to chart stars, Becky Hill, Nina Nesbitt, Shireen Cook-Elvin, footballers, Steven Gerrard. Don't know if you know who he is, but he's massive, especially in Liverpool. Luis Garcia, Sammy Hupia, Jose Enrique. There's the
What
list goes on with
what's
footballers.
what's your favorite interview that you've done?
Oh, that is a tough question. Ooh, oh, it is a very tough one.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to put it down to two. So I'm going to do one up and coming artist, because I've always been one to promote up and coming talents, especially in the UK, and one overall for me. So the up and coming talent would be Bronny, who's a dear friend of mine, someone I've interviewed, and we've just become friends, and really good friends at that. She even done a show at the radio station around for a little bit when I took over it, which I couldn't believe she did that. So we have Bronny for sure, because the amount of time she's gave me, we've interviewed it. I've interviewed her multiple times. Um, my personal favorite would possibly be, it has to be Against the Current, just because my favorite band ever, and I've watched them go from YouTube covers to doing stadium shows in
And who
League
is
of
that again?
Legends. Against the Current, so they're
Arrest
American
Current.
based.
Okay.
So I think they're New York or New Jersey based, around that area, or they're from New Jersey but based in New York, or the label is. Um, so they have done a solo tour in America and they've just been over to the UK. So yeah, I think just because I've watched them, and I've saw them grow from YouTube to where they are now, which is phenomenal.
Which is great.
Yeah, yeah. So when I got the call to interview them in 2019, for the first time, in Manchester, I literally, about 3-4 hours before the show, I went down record, because I literally interviewed Estelle, and then in the same day I interviewed Against the Current. So that was a very weird day for me. And then, funny enough, in 2020, going back to the Drive show, Chrissy, who's the lead singer in the band, I just threw an email, because we sort of exchanged emails when I interviewed them, and he was like, keep in touch, because they could tell I was a genuine fan of
Mm-hmm.
how they've developed and stuff like that. You gave me an email. I reached out during COVID, because I thought a lot of people are just going to be at home and be bored. It'll be a perfect opportunity to sort of get some names on the show. And Chrissy literally out of nowhere sort of was like, "Yeah, let's do this." Ended up getting 11K views on YouTube, within I think like about 3 weeks, a month, which was crazy for a small community radio station. So yeah, to bring those commercial interviews and these A-lists, or up and coming talents with huge followings, like Chrissy's got like over 1 million followers on Instagram alone, to bring them to a station, not in a bad way, but as small, as a community radio station, was definitely unique, and definitely it turned a lot of heads at the time. Um, and it's really fun when people don't expect something like that to happen, and you don't say anything, and it just does happen, and you can surprise people and go, "I'm doing this." That's the buzz. I feel like a lot of people, and you must have it interviewing people to do this podcast, is you get a sort of a buzz for hearing people's stories, and it's always about the stories. Oh, another interview I've done this year for Can Do, last year now. Chris Van Vliet, who's a 4-time Emmy award-winning presenter, who presents on
Mm-hmm.
CBS over in America. So he's mates with Dwayne Johnston,
Right.
which which is crazy, to be friends with The Rock.
Yeah.
And just hearing his story as well, and he has sort of a similar philosophy to sort of me when it's interviewing, and I'm sure you understand this as well, is you get to hear these people's stories and you get to take little bits and maybe take a little bit of something and put it into your own life. And he always ends his interviews. So I twist it on him. He always asks this question saying, the three things you're grateful for. So I thought, you know what, I've got to ask him. And at the time, he was just about to become a dad. So yeah, it was a very special time to interview him, and he was super down to earth. So he's definitely top three for me. So yeah, Bronny, Chris Van Vliet against the current for me. I'm probably missing people out if I am, and you're listening to this. Sorry, I do appreciate it, but yeah, for me personally, it'll be them three.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm going to thank you very much for being here. Can you believe it? We've been at this now just about a minute over an hour. So we've been having a lot of fun doing it. If people want to reach out to you, maybe learn as you're starting companies and doing things, how can they do that?
So just search me up on Instagram, Producer Dan. I'm sure you'll put links in the YouTube and on socials and stuff. Feel free just to click a request on the follow. I'll follow. Just search my name, Dan Spelman, on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn user these days. That's how we sort of connected through Shelby. So Sheldon, I'm going to call him Sheldon. Yeah, big shout out to Sheldon. So yeah, feel free to reach out on there, or just search Luma Socials on Google. There'll be contacts in there if you want to have a little look at the business. The website's going to be up in the coming days. We've just took it back down to sort of change a few things because I'm a perfectionist, and my brother does. I do my brother's head in about it. But
there you go.
That's looking at launching sort of end of Jan, going into Feb maybe. So yeah, we've got a few we're just ironing out a few things with the first few clients, sort of thing. So yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank all of you for listening out there, wherever you happen to be. Love to get your thoughts, and we certainly would appreciate it if you'd give us a 5-star rating for our episode today. Daniel has been a very fascinating guest, and clearly is as unstoppable as it gets. And I am so grateful that he took the time to be here and that you took the time to listen. So thank you for doing that all around. If you'd like to reach out to me, you're welcome to do so. You can email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's MICHAELHI at accessibe.com. Or go to our podcast page, which is www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And that's MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. So really appreciate you all being here and listening to us. And Daniel, you being a part of the whole conversation that we have had to have. So thank you very much for that. If you know of anyone, and you listening know of anyone who might be a good guest on Unstoppable Mindset, love to hear from you. We are always looking for opportunities to chat with more people. So if you have any ideas of people we ought to have on as guests, please let us know, and we'll get them on. And one last time again, Daniel, I want to thank you, and we really appreciate you being here and taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. I think you're inspirational, Michael. Keep doing what you're doing. There's not a podcast out there like this. Honestly, absolute inspirational. Thank you for having me on. I cannot thank you enough. So yeah.